Hello! Welcome to the Catella Bubble, where I, Catella, discuss the royal family, British politics, and the media. Here we ask the deep questions. What will the future of the monarchy look like? Is Britain's democracy doomed? And what the heck happened with The Crown Season 6? Before I get comments, yes, I am planning to do a review of Omid Scobie's Endgame. I've listened to the audiobook. Highly recommend it, but I'm still waiting for my physical copy of the book to arrive so I can, annotate it and pick out all the quotes and stuff I want to go over for my review. But I promise, it's coming. For today, however, I've decided it's time to look at The Crown. Before we jump into that though, if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe, please leave a comment, please hit the like button, all of the things that you're supposed to do. Could you just do them? Just do them. Now, when The Crown first started, I absolutely adored it. Not only were the sets and the costumes amazing, but the writing was top notch.
This earth, this realm, this England.
I know that The Crown has gotten criticism in the past for not necessarily being very accurate, historically speaking. But with any period piece, what's more important to me is that what is crafted by the screenwriters and directors and cinematographers is a good, solid narrative. We can discuss the accuracy for sure, but what keeps an audience engaged is characterization, dialogue, and thematic resonance. In the early seasons, The Crown did this masterfully. Each character from the royal family felt realistic in that they had flaws, but also garnered sympathy based on their duties and obligations. The themes of The Crown relied on this really strong characterization to allow the audience to deduce independently how the system had trapped certain members into favorable and unfavorable positions or caused familial tensions. But by season 5, I don't know what happened, but all that smart, subtle writing just flew out the frickin' window. I started to notice that the writing in season 5 was starting to become less subtle in its messaging, to the point of being comically bad sometimes. Whereas in previous seasons, themes were up to the interpretation of the viewer, starting around season 5, characters just started saying themes and ideas within the dialogue in this very clunky, awkward sort of way. I think the worst scene to do this is in season 5, episode 4, where Princess Margaret literally gives a monologue about how she and Charles are so similar.
It is different.
How is it different? Anne is a royal princess with no prospect of acceding to the throne, as was I. Commander Lawrence is a palace equerry, marrying scandalously above his station. Peter was a palace equerry, hoping to marry scandalously above his. Anne and Commander Lawrence are in love. Peter and I were in love. In both cases, one party is a divorcee. The situation is identical in every way except for the outcome.
And it's why do you need to say that? I can just interpret that. Although The Crown still has some great scenes that don't try to hit you over the head with a theme or messaging, I feel like the amount that they do has skyrocketed. Which brings us to season 6, which, oof. Only the first 4 episodes are out and still, oof. Let's talk about it. There are some scenes that I thought did a great job of visualizing the history in a thematically relevant way. For example, I really like the scene in episode 1 where Tony Blair and the Queen are having a meeting.
I hear you had a visit from Princess Diana.
Yes, she came to check us last week with Prince William. We had a nice game of five-a-side. That's football.
In general, I think The Crown does these scenes very well, though we obviously cannot know from any sort of historical records or anything because there's no transparency in the British government. We have no idea what was said in these meetings between any prime minister and the queen. We know that they do have meetings, but we can't know anything about what has been said. And I think The Crown uses these moments in a really great way to show metaphorically the tensions and differences and agreements and disagreements between the government and the royal family, the institution.
She wanted to know if I, that is the government, could find a way to harness her gifts on a more formal basis, and that any official role we might offer her would be enormously appreciated.
I always say it's hard to be half in anything. You're either in or out. You yourself will know the difference of being in government or out.
They're a great way to show the political climate juxtaposed with the firm's overall perspectives on what's going on. Another scene I really liked was the landmine scene with Princess Diana. I think visually, the directors and cinematographers captured that moment very well. The costumes, the set, the music, I think come together nicely to capture the moment very well, to represent this historic moment in Diana's career as she begins to step into a more political world, unfortunately, a little bit too late, and unfortunately doesn't get to live to see out that political future. I also thought the scenes with Mark Boland did a great job of describing Operation PB, Camilla's PR rehabilitation, and gives the audience a decent understanding of Boland's strategies.
Mirror is going to be running a survey to be printed on Mrs. PB's birthday. It shows that 2/3 of all respondents now accept the relationship and believe you should be free to marry.
Really?
Really?
Unfortunately, we only get like one brief glimpse of this in like the first episode. Then it just kind of disappears, which is odd considering it has massive implications, even into the modern day with Camilla now being queen. And it has story relevance to the story of Diana that they really seem keen on telling, but they don't seem to really focus on how the press, especially that was generated through Operation PB to rehabilitate Camilla, it doesn't really delve into how that impacted Diana's life very much. We get like brief glimpses here and there that she's followed by paparazzi, but we don't really have the narrative make the connection that Boland is partially responsible for that with how they were able to engage with the media in the War of the Waleses and the Mark Boland era. So that's odd to me. Okay, we're in the good. Okay, we're in the good. The point I was trying to make is that we spend so much time on minute details of the last month of Diana's life, but very little time on Charles and Camilla. I think this overall was a bad choice, but I will say the scene with Mark Boland was a good choice. I also thought the scene of William going missing was great visual storytelling. Not a lot of dialogue. It had thematic resonance, there's tension, there's a slow pacing. I'm not being told how to feel. I just watch and interpret through taking in the visuals of the medium. This is where The Crown really shines as a good show. And if you go back and watch earlier seasons, you'll notice that there's a lot more scenes that are paced like this in the earlier seasons. Whereas later, I feel like they just started throwing in dialogue where there didn't have to be dialogue. But anyway, again, this is the good. So that was a great scene. I liked how it sort of represented William's dark night of the soul, having a personal journey to consider his new life and his new role in the family, and having to consider being ready, like his father talks about in an earlier scene. I thought that that was a great way of visually showing that idea without having a character come up and say, William has to consider his new life and what it's gonna look like after his mother's death, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell I'm ready to get on to the bad? We're on to the bad. Something that I started noticing in season 5 is characters calling each other on the phone for boring exposition or to restate themes into dialogue. Often it's to tell the audience something instead of trusting that we have been shown it visually. The worst example this season is in episode 1 when Margaret calls the Queen to tell her, Charles seems really happy with Camilla. Bye!
Do you know, I don't think I've ever seen Charles so relaxed and confident and entirely himself.
Is that what this telephone call is about?
Like, that's it. That's the scene. Like, we were shown this visually at the party. We saw Charles having a good time. We saw that this was his plan the whole time, wanting to introduce her into society. Like, we don't need to be told that. And we don't have to actually see a character say that to the Queen. We can have that happen in some other organic way, or just assume that she's going to figure it out later on, because again, that was the entire point of the episode. There's another example in episode 4 where Charles and Camilla are on the phone right after Diana has died, and Charles is literally on the phone like, this raises so many questions.
All one has is questions. Why did she change her plans? What was she doing in Paris? What caused the accident? Oh, this is going to be enormous. People have no idea. This is going to be the biggest thing that any of us has ever seen.
You know, how is the public gonna move on from this? How is everybody gonna react? What does the future of the monarchy look like? Yeah, I know those are all the thematic questions. That's me as the audience. I'm engaging. I'm asking those questions. I know those are the questions to be asked. I don't need a character to reiterate basic thematic questions. But what do you have to say about those questions? That's your job as the TV show. It's not to have characters state potential thematic questions. It's for you to answer those thematic questions in a visual and engaging way. I feel like a lot of this season was ruined by bad dialogue, when no dialogue or minimal dialogue would have had a much better impact. By trying to infuse dialogue with a lot of attempts to state the theme or the messages or the ideas and telling us how the characters think and feel, they could just allow the actors to show us visually what they think and what some of the themes might be. Like, The Crown is full of amazing actors. They are not bad actors. They don't have to tell us what they're thinking and feeling all the time. I can believe them and see it in their eyes when they do these performances. We're going to talk about Mohammed al-Fayed in a moment, but his actor is incredible. In the 4th episode, I thought he did an amazing job, and I feel so bad that they did him so dirty in this season. We gotta wait, we're getting there. One great example of a scene where I think it would have worked better with no dialogue or minimal dialogue instead of the dialogue that was there was when the family was walking behind Diana's coffin.
Don't react. Keep your eyes forward or on the ground. Concentrate on the act of walking. Step by step.
The whole time that Prince Philip is talking there, I'm just like, stop talking. Why are you talking? Why are you telling us this? It's so that he can reiterate this theme of step by step, take it one bit at a time. You can show that visually. You can let us like bask in the silence for a bit. Just listen to the clatter of hoofs on the cobblestones. And then we can maybe engage with that theme in other subtler ways. But it's like that entire tension of the scene was completely broken because it's filled with more dialogue that's just hitting me over the head with what I should be thinking about when I'm already thinking about it, because that's what the story's about. I also felt like this season of The Crown is playing more into the royal family's narrative that Diana was just legit crazy.
But in a strange way, this does also present us with an opportunity. You know, coming here today, I couldn't help being struck by the two very different cultures at play here. Saint-Tropez, Scotland. Scandal, dignity. Irresponsibility, duty. Selfishness, principle. A tabloid princess as opposed to a broadsheet prince. Now, how would you feel about doing a counter photo?
Which is not true. We get a brief discussion of Charles and Camilla trying to rehabilitate their images with the help of Mark Boland, but we don't see any of the horrible treatment of Diana in the media. In fact, The Crown kind of portrays exactly what the family's narrative was, which was that Diana was just out partying all the time, being unserious, only wanting to hang out and relax with the boys, not actually wanting to be like a proper parent, hanging out on a yacht, sort of teasing the paparazzi. Whereas what we get from this season is like a very, very sympathetic Charles who takes things very seriously, that wants to be like a very involved dad, that's very like emotionally in touch and like in tune with other people's emotions and feelings in a way that it just is not believable to me.
I agree with your instinct, but I do think it's important that senior members of the family keep an eye on the mood out there.
I thought we might concentrate on the mood here and taking care of this family.
Diana was part of this family.
Divorced.
Always been hard for us to understand the connection that Diana has with people, but the fact that it's inexplicable shouldn't lead us to deny it.
And he only does photo ops with the boys that are with like a respectful photographer. Like, I just don't think that this is a great way to portray Diana, as it plays into the same tropes that the royal family has kind of been putting out into the media since the divorce. It's not to say that maybe there's not bits and pieces of that are true. Like, I'm not saying Diana's a saint or she never did anything wrong or anything. Like, I'm sure there's criticisms we can have of Diana. But I think it's just interesting that that's where the narrative really focuses, is a lot of it's spent making Diana seem like a very unserious and kind of crazy person, and a lot of time trying to make Charles seem like a very sensitive and sympathetic person, which is interesting. Time for the ugly. What the fuck is going on with Mohammed al-Fayed this season? Every scene that he is in, he's like in his supervillain lair trying to mastermind like some sort of relationship between Dodi and Diana, so that honestly I don't even really know. So he can stick it to the royal family, so he can make a power grab, so he can get British citizenship. And of course, my biggest pet peeve, most of this nonsense is conducted over the phone. This seems to be the #1 way that writers shoehorn in dialogue that they know makes no goddamn sense. I think the worst example of this is when Mohammed al-Fayed calls a maid on his yacht to interrogate her as to whether or not Dodi and Diana were intimate.
Mr. Mohammed?
I want you to tell me if Mr. Dodi and the princess are intimate. You know the question I'm asking.
Like, come on. Like, there's creative license, and there's like, what the hell am I watching? None of what we're really seeing, especially in those first 3 episodes, seems to portray a nuanced individual human being who really existed. And I think that's why the portrayal of Mohammed al-Fayed is extremely concerning to me. Now, yes, Mohammed al-Fayed was an odd character in real life. He claimed that Diana was pregnant, which we know is not true. He claimed that Dodi and Diana were engaged, which the Crown tries to explain how that happened, and that's even more confusing. Mohammed also sort of fell down a conspiracy rabbit hole of sorts about Dodi and Diana's death. And I know that that's like not good, that he was potentially spreading misinformation or maybe was misinformed or whatever it was, but obviously he was a man that went through a lot of things in his life, and I think that he could have been portrayed as a more nuanced person. Like, he can have those parts of him that did things that were wrong or pressured his son too much or said things that weren't true about Dodi and Diana. All of those things can be true, but we can also see a human being that has like other positive qualities and isn't just like trying to manipulate and mastermind some evil scheme that eventually, spoiler alert, gets Dodi and Diana killed.
بس موجود عندهم في فرع باريس.
طب خدها واطلع على باريس.
أنا كنت ناوي أعمل كده بس هي عايزة تروح.
لا طبعا لا. تاخدها الأول على باريس وتجيب الخاتم وتلبسه لها.
Despite some of the strange, unprovable things that Mohammed al-Fayed said after Dodi and Diana's death, I don't believe we have any evidence that he was twirling his mustache and trying to be a chaos demon. One, this portrayal kind of comes off as racist. An evil man of color trying to take down the royal family through manipulating his son, his son's fiance, and Diana. Second, the strange consequence of this decision in writing Mohammed's character in this way is that it makes Dodi al-Fayed come off like the most wet blanket of a man. He doesn't make any of his own decisions. He seems to be just pressured into making choices by Mohammed. We don't ever really see him like make an active choice. He basically always gets badgered into making choices by his father. He doesn't take any actions in courting Diana. Like, I guess he maybe made some decisions and that he like went out and bought her this or did that or whatever. But the overarching idea of like getting involved with Diana or wanting to be romantically linked with Diana wasn't his idea. It came from his father. He doesn't take any actions in leaving his fiancée. Again, that seems to be masterminded by his father as well. Or choosing to go to Paris, which again seems to be specifically for pleasing his father in getting this end game with Diana or whatever. In some ways, it puts the blame of the deaths of Diana and Dodi al-Fayed on Mohammed and his evil machinations. Because if he hadn't been so invested in like forcing Dodi al-Fayed to like go through with his plan to dump his previous fiance and then try to get intimate with Diana, then they wouldn't have gone to Paris and gone to this hotel, and Dodi wouldn't have proposed to her in the hotel, and that wouldn't have made it awkward, and him lying about it over the phone, which again, phones, and then they wouldn't have left that hotel and then gotten in the car accident. So I know maybe that's not what the writers intended, but the implication through this wacky chain of events is that Mohammed is ultimately responsible and Diana didn't really want to be there and he kind of like forced her to be there through Dodi, who he was manipulating. And all of this is very bizarre because in episode 4 we get tonal whiplash as we're meant to sympathize with Mohammed al-Fayed as he grieves for Dodi, which makes it all the more crazy because why didn't we spend the previous 3 episodes trying to make Mohammed al-Fayed a sympathetic character before episode 4 when we're meant to extremely sympathize with him as a grieving father? It kind of makes it seem like how are we meant to read episode 4 then if we saw him as this sort of like villainous figure for the first 3 episodes? I think that this is a really baffling choice as well because Mohammed al-Fayed just died. He died August 30th, 2023, this year. And these episodes were released on November 16th, 2023. If he had lived to see this portrayal, I cannot imagine he would think that this was a fair portrayal of him or to his son. Speaking of this weird dynamic that's created by the bad writing of Mohammed al-Fayed and Dodi al-Fayed consequently, is that it makes the story very confusing narratively. With what's shown on screen, what possesses Dodi al-Fayed to propose to Diana?
What do you do?
It's the ring you said you liked in Monte Carlo. A ring with a specific title. Dis-moi oui. And so, I have a question I want to ask you, to which I hope you will indeed tell me yes.
No.
The entire time we see a sheepish Dodi who seems hesitant to go with his father's weird plans to seduce Diana. Then he's buying an engagement ring even after it seems clear that Diana wants to leave. Again, in this version of events, I don't know if that's accurate to real life. If Dodi had previously had more agency, or he somehow saw that Diana was more interested in him than we saw in the rest of the episodes, this might have made more sense. But as it's structured now in the episodes, this either seems like Dodi is just a pawn in his father's power play, and he proposes to Diana basically as a long shot to hope that he gets his father's praise, or Dodi's completely oblivious to how Diana feels and how she has behaved up to this point in the series. Also, I think it's so egregious that they put Charles and Camilla so far out of the spotlight when their flirtations with Spin during this time period become such a big part of their personalities. To have very little of that be explored, especially when a lot of the previous Crown seasons have been focused on this media story. That's why I liked it so much. They really discussed the relationships more between the royal family and the media, like when they talked about the coronation, or when they filmed the documentary, or in one season they have to convince Princess Anne to give an interview because she's so popular. And these stories are really interesting in The Crown, where they talk about that PR relationship. So to have so little of that explored, but so very much of it be dumb scenes about characters that have all passed away and cannot question how they're being portrayed and have no way to defend themselves, with lots of questionable subtext, is very frustrating, because I know that The Crown could do better. And love it or hate it, Mark Boland is just a big part of the story. Oh, yeah, we're done. I'm very concerned about the William and Kate stuff. Yeah, I'm really concerned about how The Crown's gonna end. But let's hope. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know, what did you think about The Crown Season 6? Am I being too harsh on it? I don't think I am, but you can argue about it in the comments. Please subscribe, please like. Please let me know what you thought. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye!
Hasn't everyone had enough of photographs?
But if anything, this week's events have proved just how powerful a photograph can be.
How could I justify that to the boys, let alone to myself? Besides, Diana and I are getting on rather well at the moment.